Life on the road isn't just about long hauls and lonely nights. Sometimes, it's the people you meet along the way that change everything, if only for a moment. This is the story of a trucker named John, a man caught between the weight of his marriage and the lure of the unknown. What happened to him one night at a truck stop off I-95 near Savannah would stay with him forever. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join me on mile marker 31, where every mile has a story, and every story takes you deeper into the life of a trucker.
Chapter 1. A ring on his finger, a weight on his heart. The sun was already slipping low when I eased my rig into a truck stop off I-95, just outside Savannah. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the kind of southern dusk that always feels heavier than it should humid, sticky and slow. My body was warm from the miles behind me, but it was my mind that carried the real fatigue. My name's John. I've been hauling freight across this country for over a decade, and in that time, the road has become both my sanctuary and my prison. I've got a ring on my finger, though lately it feels more like a chain than a promise. My marriage. Well, let's just say it's hanging by a thread. Arguments over the phone, long silences when I'm home, the kind of distance that no highway can measure. That night, sitting behind the wheel as the engine ticked in the cooling air, I thought about my wife, about how the love we used to share had been replaced with suspicion, bitterness, and words we couldn't take back. She thought the road had stolen me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I let it. I cut the engine, the vibration dying into silence. The truck stoplights flickered on, buzzing against the twilight. A couple of drivers were already headed, inside with their duffel bags slung over their shoulders, chasing a hot shower and a plate of greasy food before calling it a night. I leaned back in my seat, rubbing my face, telling myself I'd do the same soon. The truth was, I was in no rush, because even though I was bone tired, I wasn't sure I wanted to be alone in that cab with my thoughts. It was then I noticed the headlights pulling in beside me. A sleek rig, chrome polished enough to catch the fading light, eased into the spot next to mine. And in the driver's seat was someone I wasn't expecting to see. A woman, not just any woman, but the kind that turned heads without trying. Long hair catching the glow of the truck stop neon, sharp eyes scanning the lot before they landed right on me. For a second, I thought she might look away, but she didn't. She held my gaze. And in that quiet moment, with the Georgia dusk closing in, I felt the weight of my wedding ring like never before. Chapter 2. The Woman in the Next Rig. I tried not to stare. God knows I did. But when you've been living off coffee, truck stop food, and the sound of your own voice echoing back at you for days on end, it's hard not to notice something or someone different. She leaned forward in her seat, her arm resting against the wheel like she'd been doing this her whole life. Her cab light flicked on for just a second, enough for me to catch a glimpse of her face. Strong features, confident, the kind of beauty that doesn't fade in the dim glow of a dashboard. She wasn't smiling, but she didn't have to. For a few beats, we just sat there, engines cooling, the silence between our cabs thicker than the humid Georgia air. Her eyes met mine again, steady, unflinching. Not a casual glance, but a look that said she knew exactly what she was doing. I shifted in my seat, pretending to adjust the mirrors, trying to act like I wasn't caught up in it. But she tilted her head slightly, almost like she was daring me to look back. And I did. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just tired. I was vulnerable. I told myself to grab my bag, go inside, and forget about it. Just another truck stop, just another face. Nothing more. But when I cut the lights in my cab, I caught her reflection in the glass. She was still watching me, and for reasons I couldn't explain, my heart kicked up a notch. In the distance, a reefer unit droned on, and the lot filled with the smells of diesel and fried food drifting from the diner. But all of that faded into the background, because in that moment, it felt like the entire stop had emptied out just her and me, two strangers in the same stretch of highway night. I didn't know it yet, but the decisions I was about to make would follow me a lot farther than Savannah. Chapter 3. The knock at the door. I had just stretched out on the bunk, telling myself I'd call it an early night. Maybe get some sleep before the long push in the morning. The lot had quieted down, a steady rhythm of trucks humming in their idle, and I let myself drift into that half-awake haze only truckers understand. That's when it came 3 sharp knocks against the cab door. I sat up fast, my pulse jumping. For a second, I figured it was security doing their rounds, or maybe another driver needing a hand. But when I pulled the curtain back and leaned toward the window, my stomach did a flip. It was her. She was standing there in the glow of the truck stoplights, arms folded, a slight smile pulling at her lips. I cranked the window just enough to hear her voice. "Hey," she said, casual, like we'd known each other for years. "You wouldn't happen to have a shower credit, would you?" I blinked, caught completely off guard. Of all the things I thought she might say, that wasn't it. I shook my head, still waking up. I've only got one left. Was gonna use it myself. Her smile widened, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, but dares you to make a choice. "You could ask for a team driver shower," she suggested. "They usually give 2 separate showers if you tell them you're running as a team." I hesitated. I'd heard of that trick before, but I'd never used it. And the way she leaned in closer, her voice soft enough to get lost in the idling engines around us, it sounded less like a request and more like an invitation. For a long second, I didn't answer. My wedding ring felt heavy against the steering wheel, the weight of it pressing into my skin. But then her eyes met mine again, steady and unwavering, and I felt myself nod. "All right," I said quietly. "Let's give it a shot." She smiled again, and just like that, I knew my night was taking a turn I hadn't planned on. Chapter 4. At the counter. Walking across the lot beside her, I could feel the shift in the night. The air was heavy with diesel and fried food drifting out from the diner. But all I noticed was the sound of her boots on the pavement, and the faint trace of perfume that didn't belong in a truck stop parking lot. We stepped through the glass doors, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The air inside was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and motor oil, a mix every driver knew too well. A couple of drivers sat slumped at a quarter booth, half asleep over plates of eggs and bacon, while the cashier at the counter flipped lazily through a magazine. The woman walked with confidence, not a trace of hesitation in her step. She leaned an elbow against the counter and gave the cashier a practiced smile. "Need a team driver shower," she said smoothly. "2 keys." The kid behind the counter looked up, chewing on his pen like he'd been asked to solve algebra. He tapped at the computer, frowned, then shook his head. "Sorry, only got 1 shower left. Big rush tonight. You'll have to share." The words hung there, heavy. I felt my throat tighten, and for a second, I almost spoke up, ready to back out. But before I could, she turned toward me, her eyes sharp and playful all at once. "It's fine," she said softly, so only I could hear. "They're huge. We'll manage." I stood there frozen, my wedding band burning against my skin, every thought in my head telling me to turn around, grab my bag, and walk away. But the way she said it calm, assured, Like this was the most natural thing in the world, pulled me in. The cashier slid the key across the counter. She snatched it up with a grin, tossed her hair back, and gave me a look that left no room for doubt. And just like that, I followed her down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the linoleum, each one taking me deeper into a night I wasn't ready for. Chapter 5: Steam and Surrender. The hallway stretched long and narrow, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above us. She walked ahead with a kind of stride that left no question she was in control, tossing the shower key in her hand like it was nothing. My boots felt heavier with each step, my mind racing faster than the wheels that brought me here. At the end of the hall, she slid the key into the door. It clicked open, and a rush of humid air spilled out, carrying the sharp scent of bleach and steam. The room was bigger than I expected: tile floors, fogged mirrors, and a shower that could have fit a whole crew if it had to. She tossed her duffel bag onto a bench and turned to me with a sly grin. "See? Big enough." I tried to laugh, but it came out nervous. I told myself I should just take my shower, keep things simple, and get out. But then she stepped closer, brushing past me as she set her things down. The heat of the steam wrapped around us, and suddenly the room felt smaller. We talked at first road stories, late night hauls, the kind of banter truckers share when they're killing time. She told me she'd been running solo for years, tired of the loneliness. I nodded, not daring to say much about my own life, about the wife waiting back home who probably wasn't waiting at all. Then there was a pause, one of those silences that stretches just long enough to make your heart race. She looked at me, her eyes lingering, and before I could stop myself, I stepped closer. The first kiss was quick, uncertain, like we were both testing the waters. But then it deepened, and the nervousness bled away, replaced by something hotter, heavier. The steam rose around us, fogging the mirrors, blurring the lines between right and wrong. I won't pretend I didn't know what I was doing. I did, and I won't say it wasn't my choice, because it was. In that moment, loneliness won out over loyalty. The rest, well, it happened fast. The kind of heat you can't talk yourself out of once you've crossed the line. When it was over, I leaned against the cool tile, my chest heaving, her laugh soft in the background. The ring on my finger felt heavier than it ever had before. And deep down, I knew this night wasn't finished with me yet. Not by a long shot. Chapter 6: Return to the cab. By the time we stepped back into the night, the air outside felt cooler, though my skin was still burning. The lot was quieter, now rows of rigs idling low. A few drivers crossing the pavement with their shower bags, heads down and weary. Savannah's humidity hung thick, but the steam clinging to my shirt wasn't from the Georgia air. She walked beside me, swinging her bag casually, like what had just happened was no different than stopping for fuel. I kept my eyes forward, each step heavier, my chest full of a guilt I couldn't quite shake. My ring glinted under the truck stoplights, and I almost pulled it off right then, but I didn't. When we reached my truck, she hesitated, then leaned closer. "Mind if I sit with you for a while?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes carrying something sharper. I told myself to say no, to climb in, lock the doors, and end it right there. But instead, I opened the cab and nodded her inside. The small space seemed to shrink the second she slid into the passenger seat. She kicked off her boots, pulled her hair loose, and smiled as if she'd been here before. I climbed in after her, the cab filling instantly with her perfume, sweet and out of place against the leather and diesel. We talked about the road, about places we'd been, about the kind of loneliness only drivers understand, the kind that creeps in after the 30th hour, when the miles blur together and silence starts to feel like another passenger. She laughed easily, touched my arm now and then, and before long we were close again. The hum of the engine, the glow of the dashboard, the darkness outside, it all blurred together. We kissed, and soon things got heated again. The kind of closeness that makes a man forget every promise he's ever made. But somewhere in the quiet afterward, as she leaned back against the seat with a smirk, I noticed something that pulled me out of the haze. The way her eyes flicked, just for a moment, toward the lot, toward her own rig. It was quick, subtle, but it was there. And for the first time that night, a shadow of unease crept into my chest. Chapter 7. The Shift in the Air. For a while, the cab felt like a bubble cut off from the world outside. Just her laugh, her perfume, the sound of our breaths blending with the steady idle of the engine. But then, almost too naturally, the tone began to change. Her questions came first, simple at the start. "What are you hauling tonight?" she asked, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my dashboard. I shrugged. "General freight." But she pressed. "Anything worth protecting?" I gave her a look, trying to play it off, but she just smiled, like it was small talk. Except it didn't feel like small talk. She leaned back in the seat, her eyes scanning the inside of my cab like she was cataloging at every compartment, every latch. "Nice setup you've got here," she said softly. "Bet it's locked up tight." That was when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of just how small the space was. The intimacy of before had drained into something else, something colder. I caught her looking toward her rig again, the faintest flicker of her gaze through the windshield. Quick, but enough to notice. "You run solo?" she asked, her voice calm, too calm. My throat tightened. "Most of the time," I said carefully. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. There was a sharpness there, a calculation I hadn't seen before. The cab fell quiet, only the low rumble of the engine filling the silence. I watched her, and for the first time that night, I realized she wasn't just a lonely driver looking for company. Something else was at play, and deep down, I knew I'd already let her in too far. Chapter 8. The Shadows Move. I needed air. The cab suddenly felt stifling, like the walls were pressing in. So I told her I'd be right back and pushed the door open. The humid Georgia night hit me like a wet towel, heavy with the smell of diesel and asphalt still cooling from the day's sun. I walked a few steps out, stretching my arms, trying to clear my head. That's when I noticed it. Movement. Not the casual kind you see at a truck. Stop drivers hauling. Their bags or lighting a smoke, but deliberate. Careful movement. A figure slipping between two rigs down the row. Another shadow lingering by the trailers, too still for too long. My pulse jumped. I turned back toward my truck, and through the windshield, I caught her watching me. Not the playful look from earlier. Not curiosity. Something else measured, waiting. My gut twisted. I scanned the lot again, and that's when I saw it. Near the back of my trailer, a shape crouched low, like they were studying the locks. The sodium lights above cast long shadows, and for a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when the figure shifted, I knew it wasn't my imagination. I stepped closer to the truck, trying not to draw attention. Every instinct in me screaming to get back inside, lock the doors, and drive. The night that had started with a knock on my door had just taken a turn I couldn't ignore. And deep down, I felt that the trap was already closing in. Chapter 9. The Ambush. I climbed the step back toward my cab, heart pounding, every nerve alive. My hand gripped the door handle, ready to slam it shut and throw the rig into gear. That's when I heard the metallic clink of a latch behind me. I spun around. A man stepped out from the shadows, tall, broad, and moving with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing he's already got the upper hand. And then I realized he hadn't just stepped out of nowhere. He'd stepped out of her rig. He'd been there the whole time. "Evening," he said with a grin that wasn't friendly. His hand was low, half hidden in the glow of the lot. Then the gun appeared, black steel catching the light. My stomach dropped. Inside my cab, she shifted, her silhouette visible in the glass. She wasn't surprised, not scared. No, she was calm, almost expectant. It hit me like a freight train. I wasn't the lucky one tonight. I was the mark. "Open it up," the man ordered, nodding toward the back of my trailer. His voice was steady, practiced. This wasn't his first time. I froze, gripping the cab handle. My mind spun through every option: comply, resist, stall. But before I could decide, he stepped closer, the gun rising. Instinct kicked in. I yanked the door open, throwing myself inside. His shout cut through the night, followed by the deafening crack of a gunshot. Pain tore through my arm like fire. I stumbled, half falling into the seat, blood warm and slick against my sleeve. The cab light flicked on, and for one last moment, I caught her face through the glass. No regret, no second thoughts. Just cold eyes watching me like I was already finished. Another shot rang out, metal sparking against the side of my rig. And that was all I needed. My hand slammed the ignition, the engine roaring to life. My rig shook as I shoved it into gear, tires screaming against the pavement. But as I tore out of that lot, arm burning, I knew I wasn't escaping clean. Not this time. Chapter 10. The Escape. The lot blurred in streaks of orange sodium light as I slammed the throttle. The cab shaking with every jolt of pain for my arm. Blood ran hot down my sleeve, dripping onto the wheel, the sting making it harder to hold steady. Behind me, shouts echoed. Another gunshot cracked through the night, the sound ricocheting off steel trailers and bouncing across the asphalt. Sparks flew as a bullet skipped off my rear fender. I kept the pedal buried, gears grinding as the truck clawed for speed. The woman's rig grew smaller in my mirrors, its headlights flashing once like a signal I wasn't meant to see. I knew then she wasn't some lonely stranger. She'd been part of this all along. The looks, the smile, the shower it was bait. And I'd bitten clean through the hook. The highway swallowed me up as I barreled onto I-95, my rig roaring against the dark stretch of Georgia night. My left arm burned, every throb of pain reminding me how close I'd come to losing everything. The CB crackled faintly, but I didn't reach for it. What was I supposed to say? That I'd traded my loyalty for loneliness and nearly paid with my life? By sunrise, I was miles down the road, the sky bleeding pink over the flat pines. I pulled into a rest area, wrapped my arm as best I could, and sat in silence. My reflection in the side mirror stared back, pale, broken, and ashamed. The truth was carved deep into me now: loneliness is dangerous. It'll make a man forget who he is, what he stands for, what waits for him at home. And sometimes, loneliness doesn't just break hearts, it pulls the trigger. I twisted the key again, letting the engine rumble me back onto the asphalt. The road stretched endless ahead, but it didn't feel the same. Every pair of headlights in the mirror looked like hers. Every shadow on the shoulder carried the shape of a man with a gun. I should have gone home, but instead, I just kept driving.
By sunrise, John was still rolling south, his arm aching, his thoughts heavier than the load in his trailer. He had escaped the night, but the scars ran deeper than any wound. On the road, Temptation often comes dressed as opportunity, but sometimes it hides a darker truth. And out here, when the lights of the truck stop fade behind you, all that's left is the hum of the engine and the silence of what might have been. Thanks for riding along on this story. If you want more truck stop tales of mystery, danger, and life on the open road, don't forget to subscribe to Mile Marker 31. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your rig locked tight.